Om Aginati Miranda Syanganangana Sarakya Chaksurun Meditam Yena Tajmai Sri Gurave Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manobhisam Stapitam Yena Bhutare Swayam Rupakaram Mayam Darati Swaparantikam Vandeham Sri Guru Siyata Parakamaram Sri Gurun Vaishnavam Sya Sri Rupam Sagadatam Sahagana Raganatim Vitam Stam Sidevam Sadvaitam Savarutam Pariyajana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Visakan Vitam Sta Narayanam Namaskritam Naram Cheva Narottamam Devam Sarasatim Vyasam Tato Deodhiraya Neshta Prayashu Abhadresu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttamashuki Bhaktir Bhavati Naistaki Nigamalka Padurugaritam Param Shukam Rita Devi Samitam Pibata Bhagatam Rashamadhyam Mahora Hora Siva Vivakuham Krishna Swadam Bhagate Dharmagyan Vihesha Karuna Stadu Shamasha Parana Kotunoditaham Twam Piadabhishita Vishitam Vibhusam Epidana Vidam Vidyotaram Prakyahi Doho Morahar Ditatanam Samplation Nirvana Santi Nanyataham Namam Vishnu Paraya Krishna Pastaya Bhutare Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Itanamane Namaste Sarasati Devi Gauravani Pacharine Nirvishesa Sunyavadi Praskita Desada Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Sri Vasari Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Welcome back to our Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday sessions on the Srimad Bhagavatam. Good morning, Manasa Ganga. Jimmy and Taruni, thanks for joining us. Today is Transcendental Tuesday, which follows Motivational Monday and precedes Wisdom Wednesday. Yesterday we discussed in the first canto, 3rd chapter, 40th verse. We're going to go back to that. This is part 2 of that same nectarine verse, which is as follows. If you have the text open in front of you. Idam bhagavatam nama parana paramesamitam uttamasoka charitam chakara bhagaran vishi nirashriyasya lokasha danyam shwasti ayana mahat. The Srimad Bhagavatam is a literary incarnation of God and is compiled by Srila Vyasadeva, the incarnation of God. It is meant for the ultimate good of all people. It is all successful, all blissful, and all perfect. And I'm going to turn the heat down in here because it's too hot. Wait, I'll be right back. All right. As cold as it is outside, it's overly warm in here. So the Supreme Personality of God is described in the Shruti mantras, which is a way of saying Vedic hymns, as the fountainhead, the source of all rasas. And when you associate with the Lord through sound of all the material elements, earth, air, fire, water, mind, intelligence, false ego, air is the sound or sky, which carries the sound. Of the 5 gross elements, it is the most subtle. So sound is the next door neighbor of the soul. Sound is the point where we can overlap with the spiritual world, provided the sound is spiritual and pure. If that sound has any tinge of desire for fruitive activities or mental speculation, the intersection, the overlap is not achieved. But when we accept pure transcendental sound, which has no other purpose than honoring and glorifying the Supreme Personality of Godhead, there is an overlap caused. We conditioned living entities can enter directly into the spiritual world by reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is said to be our means of conquest. Now, this claim cannot be made for any of the other Vedic literatures. The other Vedic literatures all have tinges of dharma, karma, artha, and moksha, desire for sense gratification, for economic development, liberation, and all religiosity. So the Srimad Bhagavatam stands apart, aloof from, majestically separate from all the other literary creations of Vyasa, who himself is a literary incarnation of God, inasmuch as it is only the Srimad Bhagavatam which is the spiritual world. It says that after Lord Krishna left the planet 5,000 years ago, taking with him dharma, jnana, righteousness, knowledge, and all good detachment, all good qualities, how were the living beings plunged into the darkness of this current age of Kali Yuga to get redemption, to get light, to be saved? And the answer is the Lord left behind the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is Purana Amalam. It is the pure description of the glories and pastimes of the Lord, as distinguished from the other Vedic literatures. And it is also like the sun, so that those who are plunged into the darkness of the age of Kali shall get light from this particular Purana. The Bhagavad Purana is in fact the spiritual world within this material world. And all you have to do to access it is just recite the Srimad Bhagavatam in the association of devotees under the guidance of a realized soul on a regular, consistent, daily basis. We cited the example yesterday of a couple in a retired home in India that had been sitting down from 8 o'clock in the morning to 1 o'clock in the afternoon every day for 30 years. He was 82, she was 81. He had retired at the age of 51, and for 30 years they sat down for 5 hours a day and recited the Srimad Bhagavatam. And they know the whole Bhagavatam, memorized the whole Bhagavatam. And then later on, after dinner, in that same retirement village, they teach the Bhagavatam to about 30 or 40 people. Nashta Prayeshu Bhad Nitya Bhagavata Seva. You can, even while in this world, even while in this body, even while in the condition, the world of samsara, you can immunize yourself. You can not be in the world. You can be in the spiritual world even while here and now, as long as you recite the Srimad Bhagavatam, chant, or you could take prasadam, associate with devotees, and connect yourself in service of the spiritual world. There's no other blessing. There's no other asset. There's no other boon that compares with the boon which is extended through the pages of the Srimad Bhagavatam. Pages, sure, they're made from wood, they're made from trees, it's paper, it's ink. But really what a book is sound vibration. Unfortunately, most books, most literatures are mundane. Yad bachastita paramarisho jagat provitam pagati tad bayasham tirtam ushanti nanyata nyatarham shad niramanti shiksaya. Most literatures ruminate over the dull, dead, repetitive topics of this material world: birth, death, disease, and old age. They are like places of pilgrimage for crows. It's the same old thing over and over and over and over again. Mysteries. Vast category of literatures under the label of mysteries. It all starts out with a murder. Surprise, surprise. All the mysteries is just different ways of a person being murdered, different twisted mentalities of the murderers, different incisive, insightful mentalities of the detectives who are on the trail of the murder. That's it. Those are the same three elements in hundreds and thousands of best-selling and not so best-selling mysteries. Place of pilgrimage for crows. The same old. In India, you can get sugar cane quite cheaply on the side of the road, and you chew it. Initially, that fresh sugar cane has a lot of juice in it, and you enjoy like anything extracting the juice. But once the juice is gone, there's no further reason to chew it. Previously, when the juice was there, you chew it and you get more and more taste. But once the juice is gone, you chew it and your mouth just gets drier and drier and gets more and more and more unpleasant. You toss it away. So if someone else comes along and sees that rejected sugar cane, picks it up and chews it, it doesn't make any sense. Similarly, the mundane literatures are just chewing the chewed. Nothing new. Same old, same old. But the literature of the Bhagavatam is non-different from the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In the Chaitanya Charita Madhya Lila, 22nd chapter, 107th verse, it is said, Nitya Siddha Krishna Prema Sadhu Karanai Shravanada Sudachiti Karyodai. Love of Krishna, it's a sense of wanting to serve, to consecrate one's senses, one's faculties, in the service of the Supreme Whole, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is a natural propensity. Isn't it that we all have a tendency to serve someone greater, someone richer, someone more beautiful, someone more famous? We tend to serve those who are more full in opulences from us. And Krishna is fully possessed of the 6 opulences of wealth, strength, fame, beauty, knowledge, and renunciation. To the nth degree, he's the source. Wherever we see wealth or strength or knowledge or beauty, if we see a big PhD from MIT, we're impressed. We'll do some service. If we see a beautiful movie star, beauty queen, we're impressed. Our attention goes to that person. If we see a wealthy man pull up to the temple parking lot in a limousine with a uniformed chauffeur opening a door, we'll look out the window. Who's come to see us? Well, all these opulences are just borrowed plumes. They're perverted reflections of the full opulences which reside initially in the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore, he's the fountainhead of all attractive qualities, of all features. And we have a natural desire to serve the Supreme. Nityasiddha Krishna Prema Sadhu Karanai. And when we recite the Srimad Bhagavatam and chant Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, we evoke that natural, pure desire of ourselves, the subordinates, to serve the great. It is the most natural process in the world. Prabhupada used to say, whenever he would give a talk in a public place with his disciples, 1/3 of his age, 1/4 of his age, sitting at his feet, he would explain to the audience that Krishna consciousness is not an artificial imposition. It's the natural business of the soul to want to serve the Supreme. He said, I'm an old man. I came right in the teeth of the counterculture when people had buttons, don't trust anyone over 30. Don't trust authority. I'm an old man. I'm well over 30. I'm authoritarian. No illicit sex, no gambling, no intoxication, no meeting. These are my rules. I'm authoritarian. I'm well over 30. And yet, why are these young people crazy after chanting Hare Krishna and following me? He said, I have no money. I didn't bribe them. It is because love of God, service to the Lord, is a natural constitutional position of the soul. Previous to chanting, previous to meeting the Guru, the pure devotee, that natural inclination was covered by misidentification, by wrong conceptions, by distraction towards this body and the extensions of this body in the terms of family, friends, and country. One who is awakened never neglects his duty to family and friends and countries, but it is as if they have a paramour. Now they have a lover on the side where their real affection, where their real heart flows. But they're careful to do their domestic duties carefully so that no one would detect their alternative fidelity, this secret love that they have. There's a story in the Chaitanya Charanamrita of a physician named Mukunda. He was attending the king, and somewhere in the distant part of the palace, there was someone singing songs to Lord Krishna. Now, kings sit on a high dais. They give audience to any of their citizens who have a complaint or a grievance or a dispute to be adjudicated. So the king makes themselves available to all of their citizens certain hours of a day. And the king acts as a judge, as an arbiter, mediator. But also because it's an opportunity for the king is making himself available to any member of the public who wants to come. It's unfiltered. So this would be a prime window of opportunity for an assassin also. Therefore, the dioceses, the durbar, were quite high. They were 7 feet high, so that it would take an assassin a few seconds to jump and get up onto the durbar, during which time the bodyguards of the king could react. So Mukunda was sitting up on the dais, the durbar, with the king or the Muslim magistrate or whoever it was. And he was a physician by trade, and no one intimated that he was also a pure devotee of the Lord. He was doing his duty to his family, his friends. He was pursuing his profession. He was so good, so excellent in his profession, in fact, that he was the personal physician to the king. That means you're the best in the whole land, because there's king gets nothing but the best. When Trump got coronavirus, he had the best doctors in the country surrounding him there, the John Hopkins experts and graduates and laureates. But Mukunda was presumably the very best at performing his secular, mundane duties. And yet, he was also a pure devotee. And so when he heard this chanting coming from a distant place, he lost a sense of where he was, what his occupation. He became disembodied. His consciousness went away to the lotus feet of Krishna, and he happened to topple off of the dais onto the ground. It was quite a fall. Fortunately, he didn't break his neck or anything. But when everyone came and they said, "What is it? What happened?" He didn't want to brag or display or exhibit himself as a pure devotee of the Lord. He simply shrugged it off and said, "Every once in a while I have an epileptic fit. And that's the reason I fell off the dais." In India, it's not uncommon to see people make a show of rolling on the ground and crying, dancing in ecstasy when they, in the kirtan or whenever they hear the katha. But Prabhupada never did that. Prabhupada was a pure devotee, and he never put his emotions out on his sleeve in order to get cheap acclaim or adoration from the public. So Krishna is the source of all attractive qualities. He personifies beauty, wealth, fame, humor, creativity, love, intimacy. Every quality after which we long is personified and exemplified, and it originates from the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The problem is we experience all that indirectly and pervertedly in this material world, through family, through friends, through countrymen, at our workplace. We experience that rasa, those feelings of intimacy and reciprocation between one person and another, indirectly, as if through a glass darkly. However, in the liberated condition, when the heart is cleansed, and the process for cleansing the heart, for removing these distractions and enabling focus on the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is Cheto Darpana Marjanam Babada Vagni Nirapanam Sreya Kayora Vichandikara Vidyabadu Jivana Anandam Buddhi Vardhanam Pratipanam Purnamrita Shvaranam Sarvatma Shnapanam Param Vijayate Sri Krishna Sankirtanam. Lord Chaitanya says, you remove the distractions, you sharpen your focus on your constitutional position, and clarify your role in relationship with the Lord by chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. In this material world, we have so many relationships, but those relationships are disappointing because they're temporary. We have to die and leave our loved ones, and vice versa. Even the most perfect of relationships, most compatible of relationships, ends in disappointment. And even in recriminations, why did he leave me? Why did she leave me? As if it was intentional, as if they intended to you to be left behind, grieving, inconsolable. No, that was not their intention. But material relationships always end in pain, frustration, and sorrow. But when we awaken our original spiritual form and our relationship with the Lord is revealed, then not only is our eternal connection to the Lord revived, but also what is revived is our eternal connection with all the parts and parcels of the Lord himself. So that is called the revival of spiritual rasa. And the Bhagavatam is the purest fruit, the purest medicine, you might say, to get us back into a wholesome, healthy, spiritual state of mind. Now, that medicine was originally imparted to Lord Brahma by Lord Krishna and passed down to Narada, and Narada gave it to Vyasadeva. Vyasadeva wanted a disciple, he wanted a student to then spread this knowledge of the Amala Purana, the purified process of devotional service to the Lord. He wanted someone to spread it all over the world. So he went away, he did austerities for 1,000 years, he purified himself, and he begot a son in the womb of his wife. The son was not an ordinary son. He was already liberated even from his past life. However, he was liberated in the monistic conception of life. And so he didn't say anything different between being inside the womb or outside of the womb. So he prolonged his stay in the womb to such an alarming period of time that Vyasadeva wanted to give him a reason to come out. And Vyasadeva had intended on reciting Bhagavatam and making him a pure devotee after he would exit the womb. But he saw that in order to get him to exit the womb, he'd have to do it during the period of gestation. So the recitation of the Bhagavatam took place while Sukadeva Goswami was in the womb, and then he elevated himself by hearing these topics from impersonalism to dualism to bhakti. He exited the womb. He went right to where Maharaj Parikshit was spending the last 7 days of his life on the banks of the Yamuna River, and for 7 days and nights he recited Bhagavatam. Sutta Goswami was there personally witnessing that event. Then he went to the sages of Naimisharanya and repeated the very same Bhagavatam. Now, there's an extra dynamic that enters into the picture. Sutta Goswami was personally present at the time, at the historical moment when Sukadeva Goswami spoke to Maharaj Parikshit. But the sages at Naimisharanya were not there. So they were feeling separation. Now, we learn from Lord Chaitanya that one comes paradoxically closer to Krishna. One gets more intimately connected with Krishna in separation. So when Sutta Goswami came, having witnessed and been personally present at the discussion between Sukadeva and Parikshit to Naimisharanya, the sages had a certain flavor. They had a certain intensity to hear because they had not been witnesses. They had not been personally present. They were feeling separation. Therefore, their eagerness to hear had a certain desperation to it. That Sutta Goswami was their lifeline, their soul linked to this historic meeting on the banks of the Yamuna. So they took it from Sukadeva Goswami with a special mood of separation. And that is synonymous with more intimate connection with Krishna. So this Srimad Bhagavatam was passed down from Narad to Vyasadeva, from disciple to spiritual master, from disciple to spiritual master, from disciple to spiritual. And each generation that comes to us, it gets sweeter. It gets sweeter because of the special feelings of separation of each generation of recipients of the Bhagavatam. So not only does it come down to us intact, full, relishable, but it increases in terms of its palatability and sweetness each generation as it reaches us. Prabhupada gave us, generation, the Bhagavatam, and we all take the Bhagavatam, having received it, passed down in an unbroken line of disciplic succession, but we also have our own experiences in spreading Krishna consciousness outside of India. It's never been done before. There are unique challenges. There are unique obstacles. There are unique critics. We saw the movie last night with some of our volunteers. The Hare Krishna, the mantra, the movement, and the Swami had started it all. And a part of the movie had to do with the deprogrammers and the people that would kidnap devotees and try to get them to give up their connection to Krishna consciousness. And then there was the court challenges that Krishna consciousness was a cult. It was brainwashing. There were even claims that it was connected to the mafia. So these are challenges, obviously, which do not come up in India. They're unique challenges that have to do with preaching Krishna consciousness in the Western world. So every generation, the Bhagavatam itself gets more and more relishable. There's more and more flavors. There's more and more strains, you see, that are woven into the liquid stream of the Bhagavatam. Anything that flows from up to down is liquid. So that's pibata Bhagavatam amalam. We drink the nectar of the Bhagavatam. We drink it through the ears, and it enters into the heart and not only cleanses the heart, but fills the heart with love of God, which is our original constitutional position. Now, having achieved purity, having cleared away all the impurities and the obstacles, it's not that one then ceases the ruminations and the relish of the topics of Godhead. It is engaged upon enthusiastically, even more enthusiastically, by such liberated souls as Sukadeva Goswami and Sutta Goswami. Atmaramastammunio nagranti api kurukonye korbanti haidikim batum itam bhuta ganahari. Because Bhagavatam has nothing to do with the material world, because everything is pure and unalloyed, and it is in fact the sound vibration of the spiritual world itself. It is the prime subject matter for hearing, not only for conditioned souls to be liberated, but for liberated souls to enjoy the pleasure, the bliss of engaging in the service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, beginning with the process of hearing. In this verse, Atmaramastu Naganti Korvanti Itam Bhuta Haram Gari. Itam Bhuta means the bliss of drinking the nectar of the topics of Krishna through the ears cannot be compared, what to speak of any mundane, temporary, fruitive results to be gained in this material world, what to speak of that, but even the bliss of impersonal realization, the bliss of becoming one and merging with the Lord, that bliss is compared to the water contained in the hoof print of a calf in the middle of a field, as opposed to an ocean of water. Even the bliss of Brahmanda, of Brahman realization, is only like the amount of water that seeps into the hoof print of a calf, whereas the bliss of personally serving Bhagavan as a liberated soul and relishing the pastimes of the Lord through oral reception is like an ocean of bliss. It is said that the personal form of the Lord is so attractive that it encompasses, that it comprehends all attractions from all sources, all bliss, and all tastes, our word for which is rasa. These attractions are so strong that no one who ever tastes the nectar of Krishna consciousness ever wants to exchange that nectar for material enjoyment, for mystic powers, or even for the pleasure that's derived from merging or becoming one with the Lord. Sukadeva Goswami said these words to Maharaj Parikshit in the second canto, first chapter, 9th verse of the Srimad Bhagavatam. Parnishtito pi nargunya uttama shloka lilaya grahita cheta raja se akyanam yad aditavan. Oh, saintly king, Sukadeva is giving his own story, his own testimony. He was certainly situated perfectly in transcendence, even within the womb of his mother. How special a personality was Sukadeva Goswami. Not only was he the son of the literary incarnation of God, Vyasadeva, who had compiled all the Vedic literatures, but he was liberated prior to even entering into the womb of his mother, so much so that he stayed in the womb of his mother for an astounding period of time. Accounts vary from 16 years to 1,000 years. And yet he was still, from that liberated platform, launched into the devotional service of the Lord by hearing of the pastimes of the Lord, who is described by Uttama Shloka. Shloka means verses. Tama means ignorance. It's a word that's synonymous with this material world. And Uttama means that which is above darkness, which is above ignorance. In the 10th chapter, 18th verse of the Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna says to Lord Krishna, Vishtarenatmano yoga vibhutam cha janardanam boyakatu tripto hi shrinvato nashti memitam. Arjuna is saying, I'm feeling so much unlimited, unprecedented, transcendental pleasure from hearing you describe your glories that I want you to go back over it again. Please recite to me again in detail the limit of your mystic powers and your opulences. Why? Because I never reach a point of satiation. I always want to hear more and more and more, because the more I hear about it, the more I taste the nectar of your words, the more my original primeval eternal relationship with you awakens and manifests itself. Now, a similar statement was made to Sutta Goswami by the rishis of Naimisharanya, headed up by Sanaka Rishi. They said to their guru, Sutta Goswami, Let's see, what reference is this? I think it's just a verse or two past the previous one. Vayam tu na vitripyami uttama shloka. Again, we have that term, uttama shloka. Vikrame yad trinvatam rasha gyanam shadu shadu pade pade. It is said by Sanaka to Sutta, as the sages of the name of Shravana were hearing the words of Sutta Goswami. They said to Sutta Goswami, don't stop. Please go on. Why? One can never be satiated even though one continuously hears the transcendental pastimes of Krishna, who is glorified by Uttama Shloka, excellent prayers. Those who have entered into a transcendental relationship with Krishna relish at every step the description of the pastimes of the Lord. I personally have been reading Bhagavad Gita for 50 years. It's never gotten stale. It's always fresh. There's always new realizations to be found. The information itself is never stale or dried, withered. It's always fresh and juicy. But then there's also the fact that as we persist in our devotional service, as we perform our sadhana day after day after day, we mature, we become purified, and therefore newer and newer truths of the Bhagavatams are revealed to us as we slough off our material attachments and material distractions. Therefore, you can read the Bhagavatam for all of eternity, and it's never going to get stale or dry, because the spirit itself, the nature of spirit, it is dynamic. On the other hand, the nature of matter is static. How many of you have gone back to a favorite book, a bestseller, a classic in the category of mystery or adventure or biography, and read it a second time? Well, maybe after 10 or 20 years, you've revisited a certain favored book. But how many of you have gone back a third time, a fourth time, a fifth time? How many of you have read a mundane book, no matter how good, no matter how poetic or how expert the artist or the author was? How many of you read a mundane book every single day for 50 years and found more and more and more and more pleasure in it? Nobody can make that claim, because it's just not true. For matter is static and spirit is dynamic. When you're absorbed and immersed in the Srimad Bhagavatam or in chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, time stops. We've heard the term of people being so absorbed in something that it seems to them that time stops. It's not actually the case. It's actually a poetic embellishment. It's a hyperbole employed by poets. The sun stops, time stops, the moon stops, the earth stops revolving. Never happens. If you're engaged in focus on material subject matters, aya harati vai pum sam ujam ashtam chayana tashyado to yatsano uttama shloka vartaya. If you are not connected in spirit, then the rising and setting of the sun takes you a day closer to your death. You have not gained anything through the passage of time, but you have lost. And what you lost due to pursuance of material subject matters, goals, appetites, and ambition can never be retrieved. It is lost irretrievably, irrevocably. The only way to use the valuable days, minutes, and moments, months, and years of the human form of life is to engage the senses in hearing and reciting the imperishable, immortal topics of Lord Krishna as he reciprocates with his devotee. For such a person, the rising and the setting of the sun does not decrease the duration of one's life. In fact, time does stop. One steps into the spiritual world, into eternality, only through the Bhagavatam. Otherwise, any other topic, urdvam mulam adashakam ashatam praramya chandamsa yasha tattam veda ved. This material world and all of its subject matters are compared to the perverted reflection of a banyan tree as reflected on water. A banyan tree is incredibly complex and incredibly entangling, and the shadow of the banyan tree has no substance. So when you pursue topics and subject matters and goals and destinations in this temporary material world, you're just pursuing illusory phantasmagoria goals in the reflection of the tree itself on the surface of the water. There is no profit to it at all. Uttama Shloka refers to that literature which is not born out of nescience. Mundane literature is in the darkness of ignorance, whereas transcendental literature is quite distinct. Transcendental literature is uttama. It is above darkness, and its light becomes more and more luminous with progressive reading and realization of the transcendental subject matter. One of the glories of reading and reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam is that these endeavors, the investment of one's time and energy and attention and intelligence in understanding the Bhagavatam, in the association of devotees, that investment is never baffled. In the material world, we make an investment, and if it wasn't a wise investment, we can lose everything. Or we can just get back what we originally gained. Or we get a small percentage where our interests or our profits are compounded. But investments are always risky in the shifting, changing atmosphere of the material world. How many event organizers prior to March of 2020 invested in social media, invested in employees, invested in trucks, invested in tents, invested in stages, invested in sound equipment, signed contracts, hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of contracts to artists, only to see all that be taken away from them when the coronavirus came and mass gatherings were banned? Who could have foreseen that? Who could imagine that? It's so speculative. It's so risky. The investments that you make in this material world. Most investments you lose. Some you get a gain on it, and some you just get a marginal sort of return on it. I remember we started out our Festival of Colors season with our trucks and our stage and our big investment of colors. And we had our first festival. We drove down to Los Angeles. Do you know how much it costs to drive a motorhome and a diesel truck to Los Angeles and back? Right there, you've got several $100s worth of investment. The social media, the contracts with the artists, renting the venue, the park, paying for the police presence to be there. We had our first Festival of Colors on March 7th and 8th, 2020 in Whittier Narrows Park, downtown Los Angeles, and it was a success. And we were prepared to have 7 other color festivals to generate good income for the temple, to pay off some of the loans that were outstanding for building the Salt Lake City temple. We had all of our plans, we had all of our projections, we had all of our budgets, and we figured we would be able to discharge all of our debts and pay off all of our debts with the income from the Festival of Colors. And after that first color festival, March 7th and 8th, the following Wednesday, the coronavirus had gotten so bad that both the governors of Utah and the governors of California banned any gathering over 100 people. So we had a festival the next weekend scheduled, March 14th in Riverside. That was canceled. The big Spanish Fork Festival later on in March was canceled. The Salt Lake City Festival was canceled. The Ogden Festival was canceled. The Vegas Festival was canceled. The San Fernando Valley Festival was canceled. Not only that, but we had a booming wholesale color business, selling colors to nonprofits all over. Excuse me, I'm sorry. There's so many things you have to tick before you sit down to give a class, and one of them is to mute your phone. All of that, all of those projections, all of those reasonable expectations were there. Eventually, it just came absolutely to nothing. So your investments that you make in this material world are risky at best, and ultimately because we die, because everything is in a state of change. It's not the most intelligent, fruitful way to spend one's valuable human form of life. On the other hand, devotional service, activities like chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, reciting the Bhagavatam, associating with devotees, worshiping the deities, building temples, observing online festivals, are so fruitful. The investment of one's time and energy yields an eternal result. In the Bhagavad Gita, 40th verse, 2nd chapter, Nehabrikamo nasasi pratyabhaya shravam piyasya trayato mato bayat. In this endeavor, there's no loss or diminution. Whatever percentage of Krishna consciousness you gain by hearing and chanting and association of devotees, that is an eternal benefit. It's a permanent asset in your bank account. It will never atrophy. It will be never taken away. It will never be lost. And even if you fall away, even if you're separated, or if due to immaturity or some catastrophic circumstances, you retreat from the path of devotional service, at such time as you resume it, either later in this life or the next life, you begin from the point at which you left off. Therefore, Krishna asserts to Arjuna that in this endeavor there's no loss or diminution, and a little advancement on this path can protect one from the most dangerous type of fear. We'll just finish this discussion this morning with this verse, the 17th verse from the 15th chapter, first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. This is a famous verse by Narada Muni. Remember, 5,000 years ago, Narada Muni said this, and 2,000 years ago, Lord Jesus Christ echoed the very, very same point when he said, what profit of the man who gains the whole world but loses his eternal soul? Narada Muni said, Tyakva shradanam charanam bhujam hare. Tyakva shradanam. Even if you neglect your shradanam, your duty, in favor of charanam bhujam hare, taking shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord, and earmarking your time and your energies for glorifying and honor him, bhajana pakvata patet yadi. Narada Muni says, what is the loss? It's eternal. You have an eternal, imperishable, irreversible credit. Even a moment engaged, kim pramatasya bahubhya prokshaya harinivanam. Even a moment spent in Krishna consciousness is an eternal benefit. It's an eternal gain. There's certainly no loss. On the other hand, a whole lifetime spent pursuing material success and the approval of society, there is not a scintilla of gain. One is simply defeated and quite possibly has to take birth in the subhuman species of life. So devotional service is so special that even a moment spent in meditating and contemplating the Lord makes one's life successful. On the other hand, kyatrava bhadrama buddha mushakim kovarta aptam bhajatam shadharmataham. What gain is there for one who performs his material activities perfectly? What gain is there if after this life you lose everything that you work for, and perhaps in order to attain those pinnacles of success in material world, you might have wandered into some ethical gray areas, committed sinful life for which then you'll have to suffer in your next life. So there's no loss in the performance of devotional service, and there's no gain in the execution of one's material activities. We'll leave you today with that thought. Most likely revisit this verse. Certainly this is a verse that's worth revisiting a third time. Idam bhagavatam nama parana brahmasamitam uttama shoka charitam chakaran bhagavan rishi. Glad to see Prashant is back with us today, giving us all the references so that we can then reconstruct and recreate this class in our leisure. Highly recommend reciting some of these verses repetitively so that they embed themselves in your psyche, in your consciousness. Thanks for Rupa Manjari, who says, all glories to the assembled devotees. Jaya Sri Radha Devi Dasi says, I came to Krishna oh, well, this is a long one. When I prayed to Jesus while flipping through the Bible looking for some answers, I realized the book, the Bible, had been changed over time. So I prayed for the original truth. Only 1 or 2 days later, she says, and this is presumably some time ago, I ended up at Govinda's buffet and went to the gift shop and asked them for the original Gita. Long story short, as soon as I started reading that book, my entire life changed on a dime. Immediately became vegetarian. Whoops, just had some pop-up advertisement come in there. That's unfortunate. They're allowed to do that. Okay, your comments just disappeared, went below the bar here. But anyway, thank you very much for your comments. Thank you, Prashant, for finding us the links to all these various quotes. And thank you in advance for revisiting these and reciting and chanting these verses throughout the day for your own enrichment. What I find is that when you fill yourself up with these verses, they have a tendency to overflow. And therefore you positively affect your family members, your co-workers with the joy and transcendental knowledge that emanate from your persona. Share, join, comment, ask questions. I'll do my best to answer them. From Govinda, we have a new comment that popped up. Thanks so much, Drew. Your classes are ever expanding source of inspiration. I'm glad to hear that. I give the classes as much, if not more, for myself as others. Having visited us, of course, Jimmy and Taruni, Manasaganga, Kurt, gives me a special shot of pleasure to see that you stopped by, visited and liked. Advaitacharya, our saint, our in-resident saint, listened to us today as he did yesterday. His mom from Croatia was part of our discussion yesterday. Stephen Parma, Stoka Krishna, thanks, I think, for the second day in a row. Baishali, Takdar Day, Jaya Shri Radha Devi, always enjoy your zesty comments and participation. Nate, the best radio engineer in the state of Utah. It came our way by Krishna's grace. Sanjay, thank you. Madeline, long time no see. Sundari Priya, Dina Bandhu Das. We are humbled and honored by Dina Bandhu Das, the resident Brijbasi, who's famous for giving tours to all the holy places in the most sacred land where Lord Krishna appeared 5,000 years ago. Another luminary, Lakshmi Nrsinga Das. A third, by the name of Vaibhavi Devi Dasi, my better half for the last 49 years. Justin Sorensen, sounds like a good Utah name. Thank you, Justin, for joining us. And then Rupa Manjari and any others who took the time out of their busy day to share and to relish the Srimad Bhagavatam, the glories of the Srimad Bhagavatam with us. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. That's it for Transcendental Tuesday. Hopefully we'll see you tomorrow for Wisdom Wednesday.